Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Susan Linker. She's CEO for an organization called Our Companions Domestic Animal Sanctuary. We'll meet her and learn all about the sanctuary when we come back, so stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Susan Linker, first timer on the show. She's CEO for Our Companions Domestic Animal Sanctuary. It's, again, your first time on the show, so welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So tell us about Our Companions Domestic Animal Sanctuary. That's a lot to fit on a business card, by the way.
You can say Our Companions. It makes
Our
it a little
Companions,
easier, yeah.
much easier.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about
Sure.
that and what you do.
Sure. We are an animal rescue organization. We're about 10 years old. We were founded in April, 10 years ago actually this month. And we are an animal rescue organization that not only rescues animals that are homeless now, but works to prevent animals from becoming homeless in the future. So one of the most notable aspects of our organization is that we were given 43 acres of land, and on it we're building a sanctuary that will help animals who have no place to go and no other place to turn.
Wow, how many acres did you say?
It's 43 acres.
Wow, that's
yeah.
amazing. So that really is a sanctuary. And, you know, not to knock others, but there's definitely a difference between what you have and what you do and the typical animal shelter per se. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, my background is from working in a traditional shelter, and shelters are important and they serve an important function. But for animals that are very easy to adopt out, those animals that come in and they get adopted out. For long-term care, it's just not an appropriate environment. The animals are in concrete cages, on concrete slabs, and it's stressful, and it's really meant to be temporary. The infrastructure of our typical animal shelter really was created over 100 years ago, and it was really just to keep animals for a very short period of time before they were put down. Since then, we've evolved very much in our interest in doing the right thing for animals and helping them, and the infrastructure hasn't really changed.
Yeah, why is that? Because even though we have advanced, is it a money issue for a lot of the municipal animal shelters?
It certainly is. In fact, what we're going to find in the next, I would say, 10 years is a lot of municipal shelters, which are town shelters.
Right.
They're part of the town, not private organizations. They were built in the 40s and 50s, and literally they're falling apart right now.
Some of the same facilities still?
Exactly. So a lot of times you have now conditions where it's just completely inappropriate. So what a lot of towns are doing is regionalizing now and trying to find ways to create sheltering the dogs that are there in a more affordable way. But I think from the private perspective, nonprofit organizations really have been changing their infrastructure. If you go into any of the new shelters now, you'll find that it's more airy. The environment is more pleasant for the animals. Instead of kennels, they have real life rooms where it's less stress. And you'll also find that they're trying to make it more attractive to adopters. Most people, myself included, don't want to go to shelters because it's sad.
Right, it's depressing.
It's loud, it smells, it's stressful, and you also walk out thinking, even if you adopt one of the animals, how many are you leaving behind, and what's their fate going to be? So what they found is that organizations that build sanctuaries or facilities that are more pleasant actually attract volunteers and attract adopters.
People want to work there.
Exactly.
People want to adopt there.
Yes.
The animals look happier. It's the same concept as there are less zoos now, or at least zoos in the traditional sense of them in cages. You're the people that go to visit the animals. You're the one that's kind of in the cage, and the animals are in the sanctuary.
That is a great analogy.
Which is the way it should be.
Absolutely, and I think we're evolving too. I mean, we love our pets. We absolutely love our pets. The amount of money we spend in the pet industry is remarkable. Yet if you look at how we treat our homeless animals, there's a huge disconnect. And one of the reasons is that a lot of times the shelters were put in transfer stations or far, far away because no one ever was meant to see them. It was kind of the dirty little secret. Now people are starting to evolve and want to do the right thing. When we were given this land, we really looked at Connecticut, looked at what needs to be done, and we were trying to fill a void. And from working in a shelter for so long, animals that needed the most had the fewest resources. If you get an animal that comes in and it's very sick or has been abused, you put it in a loud, stressful cage.
How is that going to help it?
It's not. And there's no way to treat behavior problems, medical problems. Basically, when they get there, the timer starts going and they emotionally and physically deteriorate.
And hardly any of these municipal animal shelters are you know, they all practice euthanizing them at some point, right? Because they just can't.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, and even worse, keeping an animal like in a cage for years.
Yeah, that's.
I mean,
you're right.
I think that's a fate worse than death. So where do you go? And part of the concept of the sanctuary really was from my experiences of working in a shelter, wanting so many times to be able to call someone saying, this animal is failing here. It's an adoptable animal. It just has some issues. Could you take it? And that's really the goal of our companions with the sanctuary, is to be able to be a safety net for the animals in the shelters. Shelters are great for highly adaptable animals. If they're there for a few days, great, get them in, get them out. But what if it's an animal that, say, has some injuries or some behavioral needs? A sanctuary, and the kind of sanctuary that we're building, is a home-like environment. So basically, it's different than a shelter in two ways. One, the infrastructure feels and acts like a home, so that if the animals take 6 months to heal, they can do it in an environment that's nurturing and natural. And the goal is that the longer they're at the sanctuary, the more adoptable they become. It's the opposite of a shelter. The longer they're in a shelter, the less adoptable they become. But also, our organization is steeped in the philosophy to always do the right thing, regardless of the challenge and regardless of the cost. So we would treat every animal that comes into our organization like we would treat our own pets. You know, if you need to have a surgery, we're going to provide it. Euthanasia does have a place in sanctuaries when the animal is sick beyond treatment or suffering in a way.
Right.
You know, but in terms of cost savings and convenience, absolutely not. And I think what you find is that the public wants to support organizations like ours because they feel good about if something ever happened to their animal, where would they want it to go?
Right.
And so that has always been our mark of doing the right thing for animals, regardless of the challenge, regardless of the cost, and to provide a safety net for those animals in our shelters that really don't belong in shelters. Now, are we going to take a whole bunch of adoptable animals? Absolutely not. I mean, our goal is to bring them there, rehabilitate them, and find them new homes so we can help even more animals.
I love the fact that you come from the shelter background, so you can speak on it in a way that you speak from experience. You understand the pros and cons of the. You're not just sort of, not that you were bashing it in the first place, but you come from there, so you can, you understand it and live that lifestyle, live that way. And now you're doing this. And
I have a tremendous amount of respect and empathy for people who work in shelters, particularly municipal shelters.
Yeah,
I mean,
tough.
They have very few resources.
Right.
But what I found is a lot of times when they have a very rich and vibrant advocacy group or a group of the community that's advocating for them,
right,
those animals do get adopted.
They do. And if the guy, is it better, let me ask you this question, is it better for one of those people who work in those municipal animal shelters too, maybe not necessarily have a huge love for animals so that way they don't get attached, or someone who does? I guess it would be, you can never go wrong by loving an animal and working in that environment.
Exactly. And one of the things that we work on in addition to rescuing animals now is preventing animals from becoming homeless. We do a lot of policy work. In fact, the animal control officers who work in our municipal shelters receive zero required training. And these
Aren't
are
they
people,
just police officers
they're
sometimes?
Not. They're
No?
not. I mean, sometimes they are.
Yeah.
But the only prerequisite to be an animal control officer is to, I believe, have a driver's license.
Right.
You could even be arrested for animal cruelty, and you could still be an animal control
That's
officer.
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. So there are a lot of things that our companions works on to change public policy, and there's a bill that we're working on right now which will require animal control officers to be trained.
So you do lobby a little bit.
We absolutely do.
Okay.
We do spay-neuter, we do dog behavior. All of these things really have to work together, because if you're just sheltering animals now that are homeless, you're basically solving today's problems. What about tomorrow's problems? And so I think one of the distinctions with our companions is we spend just as much time helping animals today and preventing animals from become homeless tomorrow, and trying to, at the core, resolve the problems. And one of the big issues is what goes on in municipal shelters.
Yeah. Aren't there health codes that need to be upheld even in these shelters? We talk about how bad the conditions are in some of them, but they have to be at least at a certain level, don't they?
Well, you would think, and there is a governing body through the state, the Department of Agriculture, who oversees these municipalities, and every year they inspect them. And it comes down to the almighty dollar. The state says your shelter has failed its inspection. It is no longer appropriate for the animals to live there. And so the town says, well, okay, give me money and I'll fix it. And the state says, well, we don't have any money. And so it basically, everyone just kind of looks aside. And now we've got to the point where our municipal shelters, where they're literally so beat up that they are falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's becoming not only a health and safety problem for the animals, but for the animal control officers who have to work there as well.
Yeah, I noticed some are getting smart and will swap out with other towns to see if they're not adopted in one municipality, maybe they can move into another and see if there's any interest there. At least that's an option to eventual euthanize.
There are so many options that are not being exhausted right now, and I think it really is steeped in the social recognition that it's okay to euthanize animals. And that's where Our Companions really draws the line. I really believe that there is a place for euthanasia, but when it's for convenience or cost savings, that's not the ethical thing to do.
Right.
I mean, these animals are completely vulnerable and helpless.
Right.
And we as a society need to step above the tradition of just saying 7 days you're dead, because people do care. In all of the cases where we work with towns where there have been conditions in the pound that have not been good, when you get the public involved, they get very upset when they hear what's going on. And so it really is just a matter of engaging the public and getting them involved in this.
Is the word getting out enough about spaying and neutering your pets, or is it fall on deaf ears too much?
I think in Connecticut, we actually have done a really good job with dogs. You know, I think if you look at some of the southern states, spay-neuter is not part of the culture like it is in Connecticut, and in New England states in general. In fact, that's why you see so many animals, so many dogs from southern states being imported to Connecticut and New England states for the purpose of adoption. With cats, it's a totally different situation. In Connecticut, there are virtually no laws that protect cats.
And there are ferret cats everywhere.
And that's because there's no laws that protect cats. If you see a stray dog, there are Connecticut laws, public safety laws, animal control laws that say that a stray dog gets picked up from animal control and brought to the shelter, where then it's held there for 7 days, and
somebody claims it.
Exactly, or it's adopted
Right.
out. With cats, if you see a stray and wandering cat,
They
you
just
call
let it
them a
go.
control officer and they say, well, we don't do cats. In fact, if you look at the dog pounds that are built, they are dog pounds.
Right.
I would rather be a feral cat on the street than in a dog pound,
Right.
for sure, because
You
it literally
take your chances on your own, and
it's
you might
meant
be able
for
to survive.
dogs. Exactly. You know, so part of what we do also is try to fight for laws that protect cats. When it comes to cats, spay and neuter is the solution. You cannot shelter the feral cat or free roaming cat
Right.
population. Based on population,
They're never going to be able to get adopted, even if you did.
and yeah,
capture
I mean,
them and-
what happens is a lot of times people let their unneutered cats outside or abandon their unneutered cats. They start breeding and form colonies outside. A lot of times these animals are completely unsocialized. They're not house pets anymore.
Right.
So what do? What we've elected to do in Connecticut is to ignore the problem. Well, there's statistically between 200 and 300,000 free roaming cats in Connecticut. You know, that's not an issue of sheltering that. So the solution in a program that we have that's a very rich program is called TNR, Trap, Neuter, Return. Instead of just letting the cats breed and breed, you humanely trap them. You bring them to the vet, have them sterilized, vaccinated for rabies, which is really important,
Yeah.
and then they ear tip the left ear, which means to deliberately take off the left tip, so you can identify that cat
Has been
neutered.
treated, yeah.
And then you put them back into their natural home environment. You provide food and shelter for them, and through attrition, the colony will become
Diminish a
smaller.
little bit, yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't there like a huge problem over in Europe? Like it was Italy or Rome or
Greece.
Greece,
And
yeah.
in Italy,
They're in the Parthenon.
exactly.
And
There's and
That's
the issue,
amazing.
and I think it really has to do with would we allow that to happen to dogs?
Yeah.
Would we look outside and see some starving dogs and accept it? Absolutely not. I think culturally we look at cats very differently, and our laws and our public policy has reflected that.
Dogs need a license or microchips.
Exactly.
Or,
Exactly.
you know.
They do need to be licensed, and there are laws that protect dogs. With cats, not so much. So a lot of times this falls on the private sector, the nonprofit organizations, to make these changes. But the truth is, these issues are way too big for small nonprofit organizations to handle.
Let's take a break. We got a lot to get to. Let's give out a website for your place so
Sure.
people can go and learn more about it.
Sure, it's ourcompanions.org.
All right, simple website. Susan Linker, CEO for Our Companions, Domestic Animal Sanctuary. We'll get into a lot more when we come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. Susan Linker, CEO for Our Companions. It's a domestic animal sanctuary. What are the duties of the CEO on a day-to-day basis? It sounds like a big corporation.
It does sound like a big corporation, and it certainly is, and we're a relatively small organization at this point.
How many people you got on staff?
We have 5 paid employees and about 160 volunteers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
they could overrun you someday, the volunteers.
That'd be fine, because I don't like paying people if we could have it done for free. We actually have a fantastic group of volunteers that work in a variety of programs, and pretty much everything you see in our companions is volunteer created. The staff is just there to kind of steer the ship. Right. And it's really important that we value our resources so that as much of the financial resources we have can go towards directly helping the animals. In terms of what my day-to-day responsibility is, it's largely fundraising.
Yeah.
I mean,
and also PR work too.
Exactly.
Coming on shows like
that's
this.
right. But it's getting the awareness out. It's speaking on behalf of the organization as a spokesperson, and it's also bringing people into the organization as a family member. You know, we've been around for 10 years, like I had mentioned, and we have over 2,000 donors now that support our work, and we receive no other sources of funding except for donations.
Wow.
You know, a lot of times universities can rely on tuition, but with animal rescue, it really is. It's completely publicly supported.
Are there some bigwigs that will help out, maybe anonymously?
We've actually, we've been very, very grateful to, I think the capital project of building the sanctuary has kind of captured the minds of, and the generosity of a lot of individuals and institutions that have invested in us.
Any companies or corporations?
Well, actually, we just received a grant from the Petco Foundation for $47,000.
They're very philanthropic.
They are, and we really appreciate that, because we are opening our first rescue cottage at the sanctuary this summer, and we asked them basically for a grant to equip the entire inside of it. So, you know, in terms of our refrigerators, all the appliances, all the cat trees, and all that stuff. So we really are very grateful to have their support. But mostly, it's individuals who support our work.
Wow, that's fantastic. And to have that many, and even in this economy the way it is, they're still willing to give.
You know what I found was when the economy was the worst, in 2009, when a lot of organizations were struggling, we appealed to our donors, and we said, you know, this is the time when animals are going to need help the most.
Right.
They're the first on the list to go when times get tough. And that particular year, we raised more money than we had in the prior year. And I think it's because when people love animals, they really do understand that they are completely vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I found that people have been so generous and really amazingly generous, particularly during hard times. So we've been very grateful to have been able to weather the storm, and we continue to do well because we are unabashed. I mean, we will ask anyone for funds because we look at these beautiful faces every day, and we know that we are their voices to call upon them for help.
And people, you know, pets are members of the family, just like any other member of the family, so they really fall in love with them. Where is your facility physically located?
It's in Ashford, Connecticut, and I know what you're going to say. Where's Ashford?
Where's Ashford at?
That's what I said when I first heard about this land. It's in the northeast corner. It's kind of near Yukon. That's how I say it. Okay. So that and it's called the Quiet Corner, and indeed it is a perfect place for a sanctuary.
Absolutely, yeah, and with all that land too. So you rely on donations from lots of people, but you say you also do fundraising. What are some fundraisers that you do throughout the course of a year?
You know, generally we don't do that many events. We do have a comedy show and things like that, but we rely on our annual fund. We rely on sitting down with our donors, asking for major gifts, particularly with our capital campaign. And I found that special events are great for PR and a lot of times not the best for fundraising. So we really rely on our direct mail program, our foundation work, and meeting face-to-face with our donors, making the case for why their investment in our organization is important, and stewarding them and following up so they can see firsthand how their investment in our organization has directly helped the animals.
Do you think, you know, if things go well and maybe you could land elsewhere in the state, maybe you can kind of advance it to another part of the state and just kind of expand if possible?
That is our goal. I mean, we really recognize that the sanctuary is going to be like nothing in New England. The one that we've based ours on is one in Kanab, Utah. It's the middle of nowhere in Utah.
A lot of land out there.
A lot of land out there. And they're the biggest.
They keep the aliens, by the way.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah,
I couldn't believe that. And they have the biggest sanctuary in the country. And, you know, when we first went there to do research and visit, they said, you know, you could build 1 million sanctuaries and that'll be good and it'll help a lot of animals. But really, it's not going to change the foundation of the problems that are there.
The mindset of people?
Exactly. And also the root causes of why they're becoming homeless. You know, with cats, You're not going to solve the feral cat problem with a sanctuary. It's going to be high volume, affordable spay-neuter. With dogs, they found that the leading reason why dogs end up in shelters, and the number one reason why they're euthanized in shelters, is behavioral. Well, you also need to find a solution for that. So in addition to providing the sanctuary and hopefully expanding it over time, we also do a lot of work to prevent animals from becoming homeless. For example, we get about 4,000 calls a year on our helpline, and that's just people calling our organization wanting help. A lot of times what they're calling for, the solution really isn't realistic. If they have 20 cats they've been feeding in the backyard that are all feral, there's no place to put them. So we talk with them about trap, neuter, return. If they say that they want to find a new home for their dog because it keeps, getting into the trash and destroying the house, well, if that's a problem that they have, someone else is going to have that problem.
Right, yeah.
So we send trainers in to try to save the home. And a lot of times, there really is a solution out there. People just don't see it. And I found, particularly from working in a shelter, it's easy to judge people and just say people are bad and they don't care. But a lot of times, people just don't know any better. They really don't know. And so our organization takes the time to hear their concerns and try to find a program that's going to directly address their concerns. And that, in many cases, doesn't mean giving up their pet. Sometimes we've had clients during the economic downturn where they're concerned that they can't keep their pet because they can't afford to feed it or provide some basic veterinary care. Well, if we can preserve that home that person has with a pet they've had for 10 years, that is the right thing to do. So it's never really black and white. And I found that people are quick just to decide when they have an animal problem, their solution is the shelter or bring it to the Humane Society. But we'll never become a no-kill nation if we just rely on that. People need to take a little bit of personal responsibility for their pets, and as long as they have an organization to show them their way, how to do it, and provide support programs, people generally will make the right decision.
Have you ever had a situation where someone may have had to give up their pet temporarily for financial reasons, or in some capacity were able to get back on their feet and able to reclaim it?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of organizations that assist during the interim. We right now, our foster homes are jam-packed always. So temporarily boarding is something that we are not able to do. A lot of times, if we just talk with people about what about family, what about friends, what about your neighbor, a lot of times the solution is there somewhere.
They might not have thought it through
completely. People are stressed out. Sometimes they don't take the time to think things out and realize the amount of resources they may have available to them.
If things go well and you are able to expand, it's not like you're in competition with the municipal animal shelters or the Connecticut Humane Society, because if they're overburdened, you're only helping the situation, the problem. You're doing them a favor.
Exactly, and that is the goal, to be cooperative. The animals that should be at shelters are animals that are supposed to be there for a very short period of time and could be adopted out quickly. But those that perhaps, have some medical issues, for example, a cat that perhaps has diabetes, it takes several weeks or months to regulate a cat like that. This is a treatable thing. In most shelters, these animals are immediately destroyed. Well, if you can bring that animal into a sanctuary environment and give them the stress-free environment where they could physically heal, the home is just around the corner. It's just finding the right transition. So that really is the goal, is to work cooperatively with our municipal shelters and with private shelters to try to provide a safety net for animals that need them, that really don't belong there.
How are you with, as far as veterinary care at your facility? Are you able to get vets there often?
Yeah, we actually are very, very grateful to have a lot of veterinary partners, not just for the animals in our care, but also for the community animals. Our TNR program, we have veterinarians that are sterilizing these cats. Certainly there's a requirement, if you're doing rescue, to have good relationships with veterinarians, because that's something that nobody else can do. And we've been very, very grateful to have these good relationships. And I think it's really based on the fact that we don't have a sense of entitlement. I don't believe that any organization or any private practice should work for free for me. I think that if you look at the profit margin of veterinarians, it's not very big. It's very small. So a lot of times I think rescues go into this with an entitlement, thinking that because they're doing this good work, that they deserve free vet care. I really disagree with that. I think that if you recognize that people are in business, vets are a business, and you fundraise appropriately and you respect their boundaries, a lot of times vets will open and expand what they do for you.
We hear a lot about medical research for people about how there are advancements in technology and also, medicine and stuff like that. How is it with veterinary care? Is that advancing?
It's amazing.
Is it really?
It is absolutely amazing. Even just, and not just in these big, universities that can do so much more research, but even just for pet animals. I mean, right now we just rescued a dog a few months ago, and this beautiful pit bull was tied and chained out his whole life. His muscles had atrophied so much from being in one spot that he could barely walk. We finally get him well. He needed to have lots of dental surgery done, and then he turns out that right before he's going to get adopted out, and he was 15, and this is we're doing the right thing. We believe there was a home for him out there. It turns out he was diagnosed with cancer. Well, we've been treating him with chemotherapy. It's basically an oral treatment. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable how well he's doing. Now, do I think that we would go through, great measures to keep him alive? Absolutely not. This is the end of his life. But if we can give him some months where he feels good, I think that's wonderful. It was affordable. Exactly. It was affordable. It had very little to no side effects, and he's doing great. That was not available 10 years ago.
So it is advancing.
Absolutely.
We are just about out of time, so I want to give you one more opportunity to mention the website so people can go and learn more.
Sure, it's ourcompanions.org.
So you can learn about it, but you can also go there if you want to volunteer or donate too, because you certainly would encourage that.
Absolutely.
Susan Link, our CEO for Our Companions Domestic Animal Sanctuary. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time.